Hello students. In the last video lecture we had learnt about de Broglie's matter wave theory, matter wave hypothesis, in which his basic argument was if electromagnetic radiation can exhibit dual properties by the law of symmetry which nature loves, even the material particle or matter should also have a dual nature. That was his basic premise on which he built his theory, and his hypothesis is stated as every moving particle is associated with a wave, and that wave's wavelength is given by Planck's constant divided by p. P is where p is the momentum, which is mass into velocity. This was his basic concept. But having described this, now we will look into the matter as what is the mathematical representation, because in physics you have to represent everything mathematically, because finally you need to make predictions. And how do you test the predictions? You have to reduce it to a number, and finally that number should match with the experiment. That is what physics is all about, doing predictions in a mathematical way. Boiling down to the experiment, it must finally tally. That is what the ultimate judge of any physical theory. What is the mathematical? Now we have said that every material particle or matter is associated with a wave. Since it is associated with a wave, it is called a matter wave, and whose wavelength is this. What would be the mathematical description of a wave? That is what we shall see now. Okay. So now, as you might be knowing, if it is a wave, it undergoes what is known as interference. Constructive interference, it could be destructive interference, all those things are there. So wave is usually represented, as you might be knowing, by a amplitude factor, which tells you what is the strength of the wave, and a phase factor. What do you need? Why do you need a phase factor? Because phase factor is something which is responsible for the interference. In the same way, a matter wave or de Broglie wave is represented by, this is a Greek letter, capital letter psi, and it has two parts to it. One is the amplitude part. This one, e power exponential I kx minus omega t. This is the phase part. This exponential part encompasses the phase, and this encompasses the amplitude part of it. This is how a matter wave is represented. Okay, so why do you need magnitude? The magnitude tells you how much what is the strength of the wave, that is told by this number a, and this phase factor is what is responsible for taking care of your interference or diffraction or whatever it is. So that is how it is done. So a wave function is something which represents a matter wave. This is also called a wave packet for reasons, for some detailed reasons. It is also called a wave packet. This is how an electron wave or a matter wave is represented. A, which is the amplitude, E is the exponential, I is the complex number. As you might be knowing the Euler identity, e power I theta is equal to cos theta plus I sin theta. In the same way, e power I kx minus omega t. What is k? K is the wave number. It is defined as k is equal to 2 pi divided by lambda. And what is x? X is the coordinate of position. Omega, what is omega? Omega is equal to angular frequency, it is 2 pi f. And what is t? T is the time. So this is how a usual wave is represented, and that is the initial representation of a matter wave also. What you must recognize here is a is the amplitude, and the exponential imaginary power imaginary into kx minus omega t represents the phase part of it, which is responsible for the interference, which we had discussed in the last class. Okay, this is how it is represented. But even then, the question remains. For example, if you take a water wave, suppose this is the waves created on the surface of the water. What this wave represents is, it is the height of the water. Undulating height of the water is represented by a water wave. Okay, this amplitude A represents this, right? In an electric field, for example, in an electromagnetic wave, it is either the electric vector or magnetic vector. So height represents the electric and magnetic vector. Now the question was, in the matter waves, what is that which is varying? As the height of the water, which is a quantity which is varying in the water wave, and it is the electric field vector which is growing, and it is growing and shrinking in an electric field and a magnetic field. What is that which is varying? This is a question which was very, very difficult to answer, and this was finally answered, and the answer is more surprising than the question, because in the water wave or in the electromagnetic wave, these were the quantities which we could measure, right? Those were physical quantities. Height of the water is a physical quantity which we could measure. So after a lot of thought, a person named Max Born extrapolated by extrapolating some quantities which occur in the electromagnetic theory. In fact, he was looking into the electromagnetic wave, which is represented by E is equal to E naught sin omega t, or E is equal to E naught into e to the power of E omega t and all. There is a quantity which is analogous to this. If you square that, that will give you approximately, that will be proportional to the number of photons. So from this he took an inspiration, and he said, in fact, this psi is a complex number. By itself it does not represent anything physical. When you square this, this represents the probability of finding the electron. And why is this very important? This is very important because unlike the water wave, unlike the electromagnetic wave, this is not a physical wave. Because when you square this is giving you a probability wave. That's why this psi is also called the probability amplitude. Please remember, in the water wave you can actually measure the height of the water. But now what Max Born is telling is, it is true that an electron is represented by this function, but square of this does not represent any quantity which is physical in nature. It represents a mathematical quantity called probability, and this is what is known as Max Born's interpretation of the wave function, and for this he won Nobel Prize. And what does he mean actually by this? Suppose that you have psi, and there is an electron. Okay, how do you represent the electron? The electron is represented by a wave function. Suppose that this is the boundary. Let's call it as tau. Now what does psi square represent according to Max Born is, if you take a very small area, that is d tau here, if you throw an electron into this, suppose that this is your whole universe, or this is where you are, so somewhere here the electron must be there. If you take a very small area in this, that is tau, or rather volume in this, that is d tau, if you want to calculate what is the probability that my electron will be here, this is calculated by a quantity. Phi is the representative of an electron. You square it. This is the probability of an electron in the small space d tau. This is what this psi square gives you. And since psi is a complex number, how do you square a complex number? You take a complex number and take a complex conjugate and multiply. That is how psi square is defined as. If you simply square it, you will get 2i factor, right? That's why squaring would you will eventually end up with, suppose that psi is a into e power I kx minus omega t. What is the complex conjugate of it? A into e power minus I kx minus omega t. When you take psi square, e power plus I and minus I will cancel. It will give you a square, which is a real number. So Max Born's interpretation is, whatever number you are going to get here, that will be the probability of finding that electron in the vicinity of this. Suppose this is your whole universe, you are sure that electron must be somewhere here. So if you splinter it into the small fragments of d tau, and if you integrate from 0 to tau in the whole d tau, it should be 1. Why? Electron must be somewhere here. This section could have some probability, this section could have some probability. Okay, what I was telling is this section could have some probability, this section could have some probability. When you add all those probabilities, it must be finally equal to 1. Because if this is your entire universe, you know electron can neither be created nor be destroyed. There is a probability that electron resides here, that is given by psi square d tau. Same thing, there is a probability that electron could be here, electron could be here. When you add all these probabilities, it should be equal to 1. What does this mean? 1 probability means 100%, 0 probability means no probability of getting it. So when you add up the entire area, each section will have some probability. When you add up all the probabilities, it must be equal to 1. And this condition, when you say that in the entire space, I will splinter the entire space into small region volumes called d tau, and psi square gives me the probability. When I add up the entire space, it must finally be equal to 1. This is what is known as normalization, because this is the other way of putting that electron can neither be created nor be destroyed, because an electron is represented by this. If the electron is somewhere here, each box, each volume, elementary volume has some probability. If you add up all the probabilities, it will be equal to 1. This is what is known as the normalization condition. Okay. So electron is represented in quantum physics by a wave function which has an amplitude part and a phase part to it. And what does it represent? By itself, it's a complex number. It does not represent anything. The square of that represents, in a small vicinity, represents the probability of finding that particular particle or an electron in that region. And if this is the whole space, when you take the integration around the whole space, the final probability has to come to 1, and this is called, and psi square gives you probability is called Max Born's interpretation of the wave function. And when you integrate this psi square dt along the whole space, it should give you 1, is what is known as normalization condition. Now, in order to qualify something to be a very good wave function, what should be its characteristics? That is what we shall see in the next slide. Remember, psi, which is called a wave function, by itself does not mean anything. It is only psi square which matters, right? What does psi square give you? Psi square gives you probability. In that context, you have to understand what are the properties. If something wants to qualify as a wave function, what should be its properties? These are the properties. What is the first property? Wave function should be single valued. Why should it be single valued? If it is not single valued, psi square, if suppose that psi has 3 values at one part, this is the space, okay, this is the x direction, this is the value of psi, let's say. Okay. So at this particular point, supposing that it has this one and this one as the values of psi, what does it mean? When you square it, it must give you the probability. So at this point, the probability of finding is square of this and square of this. It is absurd, because probability of finding a particle at one particular coordinate of space is only one number. What is the probability of finding this particle? It could be 25%, 50% or 75%. It cannot be, the probability of finding cannot be both 50% and 25%. That will only happen when psi is single valued, psi square is also single valued. That is why the first very important property is psi must have only one value at one coordinate point, so that psi square is also single valued. That means probability at one particular point is one value. It must have a single value. It cannot be that at one point you can have two values. What is the probability of finding electron in this point? It should be either 25% or 50%. It can be. For example, it cannot be both 25 and 50. That is why if psi is single valued, psi square is single valued. That is the first thing. Second one, psi is finite everywhere. Once again, probabilities can oscillate between 0 and 1. If psi itself is infinite, or psi itself is 0, then it is as good as saying that electron doesn't exist. Okay. If it is infinite, then there is no meaning for infinite probability. So when you make psi square, that will be absurd. That's why its second probability is it must be finite everywhere. So it must never be non-finite. Okay, that is the second one. What is the third one? Psi must be continuous everywhere. Why should it be? If you look at this graph, psi from here to here it is continuous. At this point it breaks off, or at this point it breaks off. So what is the value at this particular coordinate? It is infinity. So psi being infinity would mean probability is also infinity. Probability infinity has no meaning at all. Probability can be at minimum 0 and at maximum it can be 1. So continuous means if it is discontinuous, then it is as good as saying that electron is not there, which means electron has got destroyed. At least in non-relativistic quantum mechanics, electrons cannot get destroyed. In relativity they can. But in non-relativistic quantum mechanics, you can never have a situation in which if you start with an electron, that electron can neither be created, you cannot create another electron out of it, or you cannot destroy the electron. That is why it should be continuous. First derivatives are continuous and single valued everywhere. Why is this condition valid? It is because first derivatives are very much required, for example, to find out the momentum of the particle. Momentum of the particle in quantum mechanics is given by I h cross d phi by dx. So this is the first derivative. Energy, for example, energy is given by minus I h cross d phi by dt. So first, unless and until first derivatives are continuous, you cannot attach any meaning to energy of the particle or momentum of the particle. There are many other things. There is probability, current density and all, which depend on the first derivative. So unless and until you make sure that the first derivative is single valued everywhere, you cannot have one value of momentum and energy and other things. Psi square is called the probability density. This is what Max Born's interpretation is. It must fit this one. And the sixth point is the probability of finding the particle in a small volume dV is given by psi square dV. When you integrate it along the whole space, which spans from minus infinity to plus infinity, each dV will have certain probability. But when you add up all the probabilities, it must be equal to 1. So these are the 6 properties which a wave function must possess. Actually, these two are not the properties. This is the property which is called the normalization. This is the interpretation. This is the Max Born's interpretation of quantum wave function. If something wants to qualify as a wave function of an electron, it must have these 6 qualities. Okay. So let me summarize. Every particle in quantum mechanics is represented by what? It is represented by a wave function. And how is wave function represented by? A wave function is represented by an amplitude part and a phase part. What is the interpretation of the wave function? Psi is called the probability amplitude. It's a complex number. It does not have a meaning of its own. Psi square anyway is equal to the wave function and the complex conjugate multiplied gives the meaning of probability of finding that particle. If you are in the volume dV, if you multiply psi square to d tau, if you take this, then this will give you the finding of the electron in this small volume d tau. What is normalization? Normalization is if you integrate it over the whole space, you must get the combined probability to be equal to 1. What are the qualifications of the wave function? The first qualification is it must be single valued. Why? Because if psi is not single valued, psi square is not single valued. So at one point you can have only one probability. That's why it must be single valued. It cannot be like this. It is not single valued. It is triple valued here, multiple valued. Okay. So it must be finite everywhere, because if it is non-finite, then it would lead to absurd probabilities, which is not valid. It must be continuous, because if it is not continuous, at one point it breaks off. That means electron has either disappeared or the probabilities will be absurd. That's why it must be continuous. First derivatives are continuous. Why? It is because it is through the first derivatives we are going to find out the momentum of the particle and the energy of the particle, and many other things are going to be done with the first derivatives. That is why it must be single valued. For one point particle at a one particular juncture, you can have only one value. That's why it must be single valued. This is the Max Born's interpretation, that is, I square gives you the probability, and this is the normalization condition. These are the characteristics which psi should obey in order to call it a well behaved wave function. Okay. Next, as a last part of this video lecture, we will look into something. See, for material particles we have Newton's equation, right, which is given by F is equal to m into A, mass into acceleration is equal to force. If you are dealing with a gravitational force, the motion of the particle, if you have to plug this minus gmm by r square here, and that is how you can find out this is second derivative, this is d square x by dt square. You can find out the motion of the particle by plugging into this. These are Newtonian, this is the Newton's law, and any particle of mass m must obey this. Okay, this is valid for a matter or point particle. If it is a wave, there is a wave equation. This is the wave equation. You must have learnt it in your PU, that del square y by del x square, the second partial derivative with respect to space is equal to 1 by v square into del square y by del t square. Second derivative with respect to space is equal to 1 by velocity square. Here this v is the velocity, and into multiplied by second derivative with respect to time. Usually a wave is something which varies in space and time. This is the time axis, this is the space axis. So this is the equation of any wave. This is how it is represented. Now we are dealing with, please remember, matter waves. Matter waves means the final equation whichever we are going to get should be reflective of both matter, should be reflective of the duality between the material particle and the wave associated with it. That is what the de Broglie hypothesis was. What is the de Broglie hypothesis? Every moving particle is associated with a wave. So, as Newton's equation F is equal to ma became the basic equation of classical material dynamics or classical dynamics, and as wave equation is the basic equation for the waves, the basic equation for matter waves was provided by a person called Schrödinger, an Austrian physicist who won Nobel Prize for finding out the equation. And this is called, there are two versions of it, one is time dependent and one is time independent. We will now see how time independent Schrödinger equation can be derived with whatever information which we have. Okay, consider a quantum particle. Let's say consider an electron. How is it represented? It is represented by this equation, which I have already told you. Psi, capital psi is equal to A, which is the amplitude part, e to the power of I kx minus omega t, where k is the wave number, which is 2 pi by lambda, and omega t. Omega is 2 pi f, t is the time. As you can see, this has a space dependent part. Kx is the space dependent part. Omega t is the time dependent part. Okay. Now, what do we want to achieve? We want to achieve a time independent Schrödinger equation. So, first thing we shall do is we shall write separately the space dependent and time dependent part. Okay. So, that is the second step. What are we doing it in the second step? In the second step, you easily know that e power a plus b or a minus b can be written as e power a into e power minus b, right, by the law of indices. Okay, if the base is same, indices is a minus b, then they can be separately written. That's what we have done in the second step. What is the second step? Electron is represented by capital Greek letter psi is equal to a into e power I kx minus omega t. In the second step, I have completely differentiated the space dependent and the time dependent part. A into e power I kx, e power minus I omega t. Since we are going for a time independent Schrödinger equation, what I will do is I will just multiply this time independent part, since it is not varying with time, since it is time independent. what I will do is I will call this A amplitude part, and this part put together. This is the capital Greek letter, this is the lowercase Greek letter. I will just multiply these two and call it by the lowercase psi or small letter psi. This is the capital psi, this is the small psi. So how can I write it now? Now this can be written as capital letter psi is equal to small letter psi. What is small psi? It contains these two terms, the first one, the third one, multiplied by e to the power I k x. Right? That is what I am going to get. Now I want to fit this into this wave equation. Wave equation has two parts. What is that? The left hand side is you have to differentiate the wave twice with respect to space. On the right hand side, you have to differentiate twice with respect to time. So let's first take the left hand side. Okay, so just take the left hand side. I have to differentiate twice with respect to x, space dependent part. So a into, so differentiating twice with respect to x. Remember, I am now dealing with lowercase x, right? Lowercase x, and this is lowercase x, d psi by dx. What happens? A is a constant that stays outside, e power I k x, exponential I is a constant, kx, but the differentiation is only with respect to x, that's why I k comes out. Okay, this is the first differentiation. What will be the second differentiation? D square psi by dx square, d square small psi by dx square, you will get another I k if you differentiate it one more. So I into I is I square, k into k is k square, a remains as it is, and e power I k x. This is the first one. Okay, now what is I square? I square is equal to minus 1, right? Because I is equal to, remember this, I is equal to square root of minus 1. So what is I square? I square is equal to minus 1. And what is this k? K is the wave number which is given by 2 pi by lambda. So what I will do is, there is a k square here, so I will square this. What will happen if I square this? 4 pi square divided by lambda square. So I square, instead of I square I will have minus 1, instead of k square I will have 4 pi square by lambda square. And what is this part? What is this part? This is nothing but my original psi. So let me call this as original psi, right? So this is what the equation 3 is. Now go back to de Broglie hypothesis. And what is the de Broglie hypothesis? It says every material particle which is moving with a velocity v is associated with a wave of wavelength lambda, that is given by h by p. And what is that p? P is equal to m into v. Now since there is 1 by lambda square here, I need to have an expression for 1 by lambda. How do I do that? Just cross multiply this. So mv goes upstairs, h comes, so if you cross multiply this, mv goes upstairs, h comes here, and it will be 1 by lambda. When you square it, it will be mv square divided by h square is 1 by lambda square. Okay, so now go to equation 3, instead of 1 by lambda square, you have to plug this. Okay, that will be, let's go to the next one. So in fact it can also be written as mv square divided by h square can also be written as, if you write it as 2m into half mv square, 2 gets cancelled, m into m is m square, and there is a v square h square. But I can manipulate this expression like this. Why? It is because half mv square is the half. What is half mv square? Half mv square is nothing but it is the kinetic energy. So I can write half mv square is the kinetic energy. If V is the potential energy, you remember this equation, the total energy is equal to kinetic energy, which is represented by T plus V. And what is this T? T is equal to half mv square, right? This is half mv square. And what is T equal to? According to this equation, if you transfer it here, T will become also equal to E minus V. And that is what we have done here. Half mv square, which is the kinetic energy, is equal to E minus V. So what is 1 by lambda square? 1 by lambda square, I had written 1 by lambda square is equal to 2m into half mv square divided by h square. How can that be written? 1 by lambda square. Instead of kinetic energy, I can write E minus V divided by h square. Now go back and put that here, means whatever we have done, this equation. Now take the equation 3, 1 by lambda square you have substituted. If you substitute it here, what will happen? So 2m instead of 1 by lambda square, you just substitute this. 4 pi square was already there in the equation 3. Okay, so 2m into E minus V divided by h square into psi. If you transfer this on the other side, this is del square d square psi by dx square plus 8 pi square m into E minus V divided by h square psi is equal to 0. This is called Schrodinger time independent equation. Time independent because there is no explicit dependence on the time. Here there is a spatial derivative, there is no mention of time here, that is why this is called a Schrodinger's time independent equation. There is also a time dependent equation, but this is called a Schrodinger time independent equation, and this equation is very important as far as quantum physics is concerned. It is as important as Newton's equation F is equal to ma in mechanics. It is as important as wave equation in wave physics. Same thing. Remember, this psi is a quantum particle. And what is the importance of this? This is the equation which brings together the elements of both matter and a wave. See, psi is usually represented by what? It is represented, psi, when you call something to be a wave, it will have lambda. When you have lambda, but a wave does not have mass. This is an equation which has mass to it. You can see here, mass is here. Okay, there is also a wave characteristic to it, there is also a quantum characteristic to it. That is why this is called the equation. It is called the Schrodinger equation. What does it represent? Any quantum particle is represented, or the basic equation, second order differential equation of any remember, F is equal to ma is also second order differential equation. Why? Because a is d square x divided by dt square. Okay, this is second order. This is the Newton's equation. Wave equation is also second order, this one. And the same analog for a quantum non-relativistic quantum particle is this. This is as important as the wave equation. It is as important as the Newton's equation for mechanics. That is the status that Schrodinger equation has, and this was the great advance. This is how we describe a quantum particle, and any quantum particle non-relativistic obeys this equation. That is why this is so important, and as a very special case, when this V is 0, this will reduce to this equation. This is called a free particle equation when it is not bound by any potential. So this is a very important equation. This is called the Schrodinger time independent equation of a quantum particle. This is how particles behave. When you solve this equation, that way you will get psi, and that is what is known as a wave function of that particular system. I think we can stop here in this video, and in the next we shall consider